Nikolaus, übernimmst du das?
Okay.
Nikolaus, übernimmst du das?
Ja, dann kann ich das übernehmen.
Okay.
Ja. Grüß Gott, liebe Frau Egger. So, welcome, dear Ms. Egger. We sent out our communique. So there was a statement of 4 former heads of regulatory authorities who issued a warning to see nuclear energy as a sustainable form of energy in the sense of taxonomy. And this statement was sent in January to the European Commission. It was not recognized as then in the end nuclear energy was included as sustainable in the taxonomy. And now the statement was sent again to was sent again yesterday to all members of the Parliament of the European Parliament. We would like to give the opportunity, if you have any questions on the statements, to ask them. We have two authors of the statement present, and the statement was supported by a number of roughly 30 scientists, independent scientists who support the statement, and some of them are also here. So if you have any questions, please, we would be happy to answer them.
So if I understand, this statement in general was made by these politicians, and now you as experts are trying to...
Yeah, so politicians, I mean, these are political experts. I mean, it's chief regulator is to a certain sense a political position, but it's a technical position as well. So I mean, every country which is operating nuclear power plants has a regulatory authority, and people who lead this authority have in-depth knowledge of nuclear power and know how nuclear power plants work for a long time. And so if former heads of a regulatory authority issue such a statement, it means something.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think are the chances to be heard?
I mean, this is very difficult to say. As I have heard, I think the course, it's at the moment it's not clear in either direction. So the vote could go in either direction. So we hope that we will be heard, but yeah, I don't know what the chances are.
From January, the world has changed, and also the perspective on the energy issue has changed a lot. Why do you still think that nuclear energy cannot be a good alternative worth to get
right
financed?
I would hand over this question to Paul.
Okay. 256 gigawatts of non-hydro, and that's important, non-hydro renewables was added to the world's power grids in 2020. Nuclear added 0.4 gigawatts. Last year, solar and wind made up 3/4 of all new generation. And with other renewables, in other words, hydro, the total figure is 84%. Renewables are about 4 times cheaper than nuclear at a sort of very conservative estimate. So the economic argument is closed. There is no question but that nuclear is uneconomic, and the market, the financial market, has said no to nuclear, which means that nuclear can only be enacted with vast public subsidy. So in terms of economics, the argument is over. Now, we can turn to other forms of that discussion, whether that's technical or climate or security, if you wish. It depends on what you seek to understand.
Yeah, the security question is a big question.
Well,
especially.
Okay, so security is, there's two levels of security. One question is questions of energy security, and the other issue is questions of actual security. What we've seen in Ukraine is the weaponization of civil nuclear for the first time. And as the US ambassador to the United Nations said, we escaped a catastrophe by the grace of God. When the missile nearly hit Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. This question of actual security is critically important for all existing and any planned future new nuclear. It's not simply the reactor and the reactor core, but it's also the spent fuel ponds and the associated waste stores that are significantly vulnerable to forms of military attack, especially missile attack. And if one understands the question of sort of basic military sort of provenance, it's very, very difficult to stop a missile, especially a cruise or the rest of it. There's no really well-known way of doing that. In questions of security of supply, well, 42% of the world's nuclear power plant is reliant on Russian and Russian-controlled uranium feedstock. So almost half of the world is dependent on Russia and Russia-controlled uranium. That's Russia and Kazakhstan. In terms of Europe, that's 20%. So if one is seeking a ban on Russian gas, one also must seek a ban on Russian uranium, and that may have huge consequences. And there are further discussions about security of supply that I and my colleagues can help with.
So you are in favor of a ban of Russian uranium, if I understood right?
Well, I'm just saying that if there are concerns associated with Russian gas, if there are concerns associated with Russian oil, if there are concerns associated with the Russian war in Ukraine, that the simple fact is that almost half of, just under half of the world's nuclear power plant rely on Russian and Russia-controlled uranium. And that has significant implications for security of supply, as it were. And Europe, 20%.
Maybe one could add one small sentence on the effect of using nuclear energy on the climate change. It's only 2 to 3% of the greenhouse gas emissions which could be avoided by nuclear energy. It's not so much, and it's not to expect that in the next decades this could be changed. So one has to use other possibilities in order to avoid the huge effects we have to expect by climate change.
the other issue around climate change is that nuclear's sort of unique selling point about climate is also up for grabs, because sea level rise, it's clearly understood now that sea level rise will increase coastal flooding, most importantly storm surge, which is basically when the sea basically ups and sort of moves inland, when certain climatic conditions coincide with high tides, which make increasingly current coastal nuclear infrastructure defense increasingly obsolete. The same is true for different reasons for inland nuclear in terms of severe inundation alternating with low river flow and river heating, which both impacts the potential for cooling, but also the potential to release cooling water. Basically, regulation wouldn't allow a release of cooling water to a river that's already too hot. So this means huge expense for any existing or further nuclear construction, operation, waste management, decommissioning. So the idea that nuclear can help with our climate problems is faced with the fact that nuclear may be one of the first and most significant casualties to ramping climate change.
And all these arguments are valid also for this modern new generation of power plants. The problem of supply security, the problem of security, and yes, please.
Yeah, on these small modular reactors or advanced modular reactors, how they are termed somehow. There was last week a conference of nuclear regulators, the INRAG conference, and this was a huge topic, the small modular reactors, advanced modular reactors. And the point is, what came out, let's say, was that there are a lot of designs for new nuclear power plants floating around, and a lot of traditional industries now propose their designs, jump on this and propose new designs. And the problem is there is at the moment some of those designs, the proponents don't have the experience what it means to design a nuclear power plant. So, for example, there was a panel discussion with where the chief regulator from Great Britain, Mark Foy, took part, and he said this was really his. This was verbatim what he said. The industry, he would wish the industry to be more honest, because some of the designs that are proposed to him look like they were drawn up on the back of a pack of cigarettes. Yeah, so there is the problem is there is a lot of expectation from this advanced on these advanced modular reactor designs, which are cleaner, safer, more secure. But there is a lot of research to be done. Yeah, on the designs. Yeah, there is at the moment there is not a design which could be really which could be licensed, in the sense that there is enough documentation to start the licensing process. And there is also a lot to do on the part of the authorities, which have then to give the operating license. Yeah, because all the experience and the whole framework of looking on the safety of a nuclear power plant, all this experience comes from the light water reactors. So this means the designs which are very new and very novel, and which promise to keep the waste to a minimum and to be more secure, and so we won't see them earlier than 2050. This was also something that the head of the French regulatory authority said. So not earlier than 2050, if at that date, because there is so much to be done to get them going. So what we might see are the small modular reactors which are based on light water technology, and here they are not so different from the technology that we are currently using. Here the main difference is that they are smaller, and this might there is the expectation that this might help with the investment. That you don't need such a big upfront investment. You can have smaller investments, and then, but smaller means also more expensive. So this means you have to pay more per kilowatt hour. More per kilowatt, per installed kilowatt, but at smaller in smaller rates. And if this is going to turn out economically, I would also pass this question again to Paul. Maybe so, economy on the small modular reactors.
Yeah, the whole of the nuclear industry history is based on the concept of bigger is better to achieve economies of scale, which goes against the idea of small, because small would be sort of, in this sense, much more expensive. So the idea is then to balance replace the economies of scale with the economies of modularization, with replication, with building a factory line. The problem with that is that if you have as we've seen in the French reactors, you can have a generic problem that promulgates through the entire fleet. And also, to make a factory run, you need an entire supply chain. Now, to get this supply chain is vastly, hugely, incredibly expensive. So the economic risk of trying to do small reactors is equal to more than the economic risk of doing large reactors. And as we've learned I think about 2 weeks ago, a paper co-authored by a former head of American Nuclear Regulatory Commission, head of nuclear regulation, has determined that SMRs produce significantly more waste per kilowatt hour than standard nuclear reactors. But perhaps your question was also about security, recent security moves in terms of Germany and other people in the context of the Ukraine war. Was that your original question? Yeah. Well, in terms of that, Nicolas knows a lot more about this than I.
So to understand, you mean security in the sense safe against acts of war? Is this the question?
No, it's basically German response to interim German response to potentially the Russians switching off the gas supply.
Okay, so the question the question is on the three still remaining German reactors and whether their lifetime should be extended or not. I mean, this is the question which is now currently very much under discussion in Germany.
Yes, I didn't ask this, but I'm interested in.
Sorry, now I could not hear you. Could you repeat the question again?
I didn't see what do you think about? You argue against building new nuclear power plants. What do you think about the idea of prolonging the life, not switching off the nuclear power plants?
Okay. So I mean, here we have really to look country per country if you talk about not switching off nuclear power plants. Yeah. And if we look to Germany, yeah, then Germany has a very specific situation, because Germany for a long time decided to phase out nuclear, and it was working for a long time on this this nuclear phase out. And now for this year, the last 3 nuclear power plants which are still in operation are scheduled to be phased out and shut down. And now, there is it's clear if you have if the gas supply is cut, and gas is also substitute is also used for electricity generation. And of course, the idea, why not keep those reactors in operation and save a little bit of more of gas? This is could come to one's mind. The point is, nuclear power, it's everything is on a you need long planning time scales. Yeah, so it's nothing is very fast. Yeah, you can bring up a coal-fired power plant in a few months, or a gas-fired power plant. If you for a nuclear power plant, you have to you need longer times of planning. So this means those are planned to be phased out. There is no the fuel is calculated in a way that you would use up your nuclear fuel by the end of the year. And okay, in case of one nuclear power plant, you might squeeze out a few months more, but basically to have a meaningful contribution, you would have to order new nuclear fuel, which again ties you, if you do this, yeah, this is again a commitment for at least 3 to 5 years. This means you have to keep the power plants then again for 3 to 5 years in operation. And what does it mean to order new fuel? Then here you have also to look. The problem is that the whole industry in Germany is moving toward the phase out. So you don't have basically, there is not much of nuclear industry in Germany left. Yeah? So you have to, and also the nuclear power plants. Yeah, the goal was to phase them out by 2022. And if you want to operate a nuclear power plant for a longer time, you have to do continuous safety upgrades. Yeah, the state of knowledge is evolving. Yeah, we especially after the accident of Fukushima, there were a lot of new risks were discovered, which were not taken into account before this accident. Yeah, so this was a continuous process where we try to understand the risk and see how we can write them into safety requirements for the nuclear power plants. And the last, which is called periodic safety review, where you look on the whole design of a nuclear power plant and see what kind of safety improvements you have to do for the next 10 years. Yeah, this is a periodic safety, is called periodic safety review. This has to take part every 10 years. Yeah, this is comes from a European directive, and it's also in the German national law. And the last time these 3 nuclear power plants, which are still in operation, had their periodic safety review was in 2009. Yeah, so they should have this periodic safety review in 2019. Yeah, but it was not performed because the point was made that this is not it's not reasonable for just 3 years to evaluate the safety for the next 10 years and to identify safety improvements to bring them up to as far as possible up to the state of the art. So this means if you are now, if we are talking now about another 3 to 5 years, yeah, we already have 3 years. We are already 3 years outside, let's say, of the usual regime of safety for such a nuclear power plant. So I mean, this is of course up to Germany, but if you take the safety approach seriously, you would have to do a periodic safety review, see how much the nuclear power plants are away from the state of the art, identify safety improvements, and make a schedule how to implement them. Yeah, this is a process which usually takes a few years. Yeah, so this periodic safety review for you got the last one was taken in 2009. Yeah, but the process to do it and to have the agreement of the licensing authority starts much earlier. Yeah. So this means you would have to have this periodic safety review. You would have to identify the safety improvements if you want to operate them at a safe level. And probably for just another 3 to 5 years, this is not economically viable. Yeah. And then there is the other point that nuclear power, yeah, is so electricity from nuclear power plant is not really a good substitute for electricity from gas-fired power plants, because gas-fired power plants are either backup plants to substitute for to equalize the volatility of renewables. Yeah, if you need something to be fired up very quickly and closed down very quickly, you use a gas-fired power plant. This is something which nuclear power plant cannot do in this sense. Yeah, they are base load. And the other thing, gas-fired power plants, if you use a gas-fired power plant at a constant level, then you use also the heat. Yeah, you have also the obligation to deliver the heat. This is again something that nuclear power plants cannot do. So probably they would not be a good substitute for the gas-fired power plants at all. So this is you would have more electricity, but probably not at the expense of gas-fired power plants. And this is why.
Okay, but the alternative are also coal plants now.
Yeah, but probably you would have, if you switch down the gas-fired power plants, you would have to go to coal anyway, even if you kept the nuclear power plants in operation.
And you regarding the modern, small, safe plants of the new generation, you said they would come to action as earliest in 2050. But
by the way, you can please talk in German. I mean, it might be easier for you all to communicate if you speak. If you want me to speak, just ask me a question in English. But please communicate in German. I'm sure you'll have a better discussion.
Thank you. Glauben Sie, dass das eine Alternative dann sein kann? Do you think, yeah. Gibt es eine große Chance? Liegt da ein großes Potenzial dann drin nach 2050? Weil Sie haben sich nur vorher bezogen.
Genau, ja. Also ich meine, das ist natürlich klar, ne? Wir brauchen 2050 auch Strom. Ja? Also das heißt, aber der Punkt ist, also so kurzfristig, ja, also der kurzfristig ist irrsinnig viel für den Klimawandel gemacht werden kann, ja, und für die Dekarbonisierung unseres Energiesystems, das ist nicht der Punkt. Ne? Also das ist die Dekarbonisierung muss ohne diesen Advanced Modular Reactors auch funktionieren. Ja? Das ist mal das Erste. Weil das heißt, wir müssen da aussteigen, bevor, also auch ohne auf diese Reaktoren vertrauen zu können. Einfach, wenn wir die Erderwärmung unter einem gewissen Limit halten wollen. Und die Frage, wäre das dann eine gute zusätzliche Energiequelle? Ja, ich meine, es ist halt eine hochriskante Sache. Es ist ja nicht so, dass diese Advanced Modular Reactor Konzepte, also im Wesentlichen geht es da eben um schnelle Brüter, und da brauche ich dann eben andere Kühlmittel als Wasser. Und also es ist ja nicht so, dass dieses Konzept jetzt ganz neu ist, ja, sondern tatsächlich wusste man schon in den 60er und 70er Jahren auch, dass das eigentlich vom Konzept her sehr viele Vorteile verspricht. Ja? Schnelle Brüter zu bauen, das gesamte Uran zu verwenden, nicht nur das Uran 235, sondern auch das Uran 238, von dem ich ja viel, viel mehr in der Natur habe. Und die Abfälle zu minimieren, also all das, was da versprochen wird. Man hat sehr intensiv daran geforscht. Also es ist sogar so, dass Frankreich über einen Zeitraum von 30 Jahren mehr Geld in die Entwicklung schneller Brüter gesteckt hat, als in die Entwicklung der Leichtwasserreaktoren. Am Schluss hat man die Forschung jetzt mal stillgelegt. Ja, also Frankreich hat seine Forschungslinie zu diesen natriumgekühlten schnellen Brütern stillgelegt. Ja, weil sie gesagt haben, es ist nicht ersichtlich, dass wir da Durchbrüche machen werden nach 60 Jahren Forschung. Und ich meine, man kann das natürlich nie ausschließen, dass dann in 50 Jahren tatsächlich so ein Advanced Modular Reactor Design da ist, das all das erfüllt, was es verspricht. Aber es ist aus heutiger Sicht eigentlich nicht greifbar, wo jetzt diese großen Durchbrüche kommen sollen, die man in den letzten 60 Jahren nicht gemacht hat. Ja, also es ist keines dieser der Reaktordesigns, die vorgeschlagen werden, ist so wirklich ganz neu. Ja, also es sind alles Designs, die in irgendeiner Weise in den letzten Jahren schon mal vorgeschlagen und erforscht wurden und Experimente gemacht wurden und wieder fallen gelassen wurden. Also das heißt, man steckt sehr viel Geld, Forschungsgelder in eine riskante Forschungslinie.
Man kann sich natürlich auch fragen, welche Rolle sollen solche Systeme, wenn sie denn irgendwann realisierbar sind und auch ökonomisch irgendwie auf den Weg kommen, was ja auch in Frage steht, was ja schon diskutiert wurde. Welche Rolle werden die in dem Energiesystem der Zukunft spielen? Also dasselbe betrifft im Grunde auch die Fusion. Jetzt das Rennen, wer ist schneller, die Fusion oder die Brüter? Es gibt ja keinen Brüter in der Welt. Es ist noch nirgends wirklich gezeigt worden, dass man mehr Spaltstoff produzieren kann, als man reinstecken muss in die Reaktoren. Das ist ja eines der großen Versprechen. Aber was für ein Energiesystem werden wir, wenn wir wirklich das Energiesystem ernsthaft umstellen auf ein nachhaltigeres, erneuerbares Energiesystem? Welche Rolle können dann Reaktoren spielen, die dauernd laufen müssen? Also müsste man im Grunde sagen, all das, was wir uns aufgebaut haben an erneuerbaren Technologien, das ist zweitrangig, weil zunächst mal muss diese Grundlast erzeugt werden durch die nuklearen Reaktoren, die bisher die fossilen waren. Ist das sinnvoll? Ist das ein Platz für die Kernenergie? Ich finde das sehr fragwürdig. Also wenn wir es ernst meinen mit der Energiewende, wird es schwierig für Nuklearreaktoren einen guten Platz zu finden, wie sie uns helfen sollen, die Energieversorgung sicherzustellen.
And Professor Dorfman, one question for you. You said that the economic argument is dead, is over. Is this still the fact now that the energy prices are so rose so high and could become even more? It could rise even more in the next months.
Yeah, I mean, what we are seeing is a war in mainland Europe, and all that implies. But there are sort of, there are deeper, there are deeper realities. So yes, the world is experiencing unprecedented fuel prices and energy blackmail. But the reality is that we don't need miracle technologies, certainly not nuclear technologies, to solve these problems. By electrifying energy sectors, producing electricity from clean renewable sources, creating heat, cold, and hydrogen from renewables, storage, expanding transmission, and sort of shifting the time we use electricity. And also, most importantly, demand-side management. We can create safe, cheap, and reliable energy everywhere. And the argument is really about cost reduction. And energy systems, renewable energy systems, use much less energy than either combustion-based or nuclear. But in answer to your question, does the current spike in energy prices imply that nuclear is cost competitive? I think the answer is absolutely not. Renewables are 4 times less expensive than nuclear. Nuclear takes a huge amount of time to deploy, between 10 and 15 years. So it absolutely can't help with the current crisis. There is no way that nuclear can help with the current crisis. And the reality is the renewable evolution is here. So in that sense, there's no need for nuclear. And that also is true of the cost argument. Nuclear will always, the cost of nuclear will always ramp, has always ramped, and will always ramp. The cost of renewables is stable and or declining. And that will just continue to be. The other issue is that what we've seen is the weaponization of nuclear in Ukraine, which means that presumably new technology has to be thought about in terms of defense in depth for any new nuclear. Because what would happen if there are missile strikes on nuclear plant, and how to embed that in any new design base for new nuclear would make nuclear even more expensive than it is today.
Thank you.
I've also got a question, if you can hear me. Caroline Born from German Public Radio. It's a bit about the situation of France. I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on the nuclear power plants which are not running at the moment because they're facing problems. If you could elaborate a bit on that. And my second question would be, as you sent a letter to the MEPs, and I guess the French MEPs will play a significant role next week when they are voting. If you get any reactions from French MEPs in favoring the taxonomy, and how the discussion is going, if there is any between you. Thank you.
Okay, I can help with the first part. As we know, as of today, there are 30 French reactors offline. That's more than half their entire reactor fleet. And that's due to a combination of the generic corrosion problem in their reactor fleet, and also potentially questions of maintenance as well too. But basically half of their fleet is offline. The French are powering up coal to try to ameliorate their energy position. So that brings into stark relief this notion of nuclear as always on, as something that is reliable, or is something that is there. And it looks, and the French nuclear regulators say that these problems will not go away, maybe for years. So the French are facing a very, very significant problem in terms of their reactor fleet, which is also compounded by their PLEX, their reactor upgrade. It's called Le Grand Carénage, to post-Fukushima to upgrade their reactors to to prolong their lifespan, which will cost between 50 and 100 billion, as yet sort of uncosted, which is something that, of course, the French taxpayer will have to front, particularly as the French are now considering nationalizing the French nuclear industry. That's also compounded by the potential problems that we're seeing in the French EPR reactor, where the only one that has been sort of up and running, Taishan 1 and now Taishan 2 in China, are closed due to, as yet, unresolved technical problems. So there's a sort of, an idea that potentially the EPR may have some form of elements of, and these two reactors are different, by the way, the problems may have potential generic problems. So there's huge problems with the French, with EDF, huge debt problems, huge problems with their reactor fleet, huge problems with the new EPR design. And in that sense, the French are really stuck. Now, what that implies politically is anybody's guess, because the French have sort of tied their wagon to the nuclear horse for some years now. But in that context, one hopes that sanity may prevail. But in terms of sort of strategic politics and the way that the French MEPs may or may not vote, I have no idea. And maybe others have better views than
I. I would like to comment on the second question. We were sending out the letter to MEPs yesterday, and we did not had any response by today. So I don't know how it was received by the French MEPs, to be honest.
Maybe the French situation is very special. Maybe one remark we have not asked for, but I can guess that many of the parliamentarians from France would follow the president in his view what the role of the nuclear business in France is. And maybe you have seen that President Macron has delivered a high-level speech in December 2020 in Creusot. That is an important place for the nuclear industry for both sides. The submarines are constructed there, and also the reactor pressure vessels, the big forges, are placed in Creusot. And this speech was delivered also to a high audience, high-level audience. The ministries were present, the heads of the industry, the heads of the big scientific institutions, the generals and admirals of the French forces. And he made clear that France is proud on the nuclear business they have. And that means both the civilian part and the military one, and they are connected to each other. And that was so clear, this statement, that they are mutually supportive, the civilian part and the military, and there is an intrinsic connection. And I believe that many of the politicians in France know that. And therefore, there's a tendency to support nuclear because they know that is the connection between the military forces, the force de frappe, the French force de frappe, and the nuclear industry, which delivers the atomic energy possibilities and chances of France. And therefore, my guess is it's only a minority of the French members of the European Parliament will therefore follow the critical voices.
I absolutely agree that the nuclear military is intimately connected with civil nuclear military. However, given the economics of nuclear, it's quite conceivable to divorce the two. in that sense, if France wanted to continue to be a nuclear military power, it could continue to do so without investing in civil nuclear, and the cost would be less. In the end of the day, it does come down to questions of cost. If current nuclear military powers wish to ring fence the nuclear military, it would cost nuclear weapon states less than to continue with civil nuclear alongside. The argument is that what happens is that the cost of the nuclear military is lost, is kind of hidden, is lost in these forms of interconnections. But at the end of the day, a nuclear weapons power would save money by not being a nuclear civil energy power at the same time, in my view. I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose nuclear is just too slow and expensive. Basically, what we've got here is questions of sustainability. Can it do what it says on the box? Can nuclear succeed? You know, the real question is sustainability and climate. You know, the reality is nuclear is just too inflexible. It's too costly. It can't ramp up and down with the swings of demand. When the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, that's when grid upgrades, interconnection, which enables power to be shared between countries, critically energy efficiency management, demand side management, energy efficiency, energy conservation, and rapidly evolving storage technology steps in to make the difference. So the reality is that nuclear's contribution can and will only ever be marginal. It's actually a sort of astonishing that so much money and so much attention has been paid to nuclear, when the reality is it's well past its sell-by date. This is a mid-20th century technology that doesn't really have a place. The reason why we're seeing so much press interest in it and media interest in it is because it's a last gasp for the nuclear industry. If it doesn't make a substantive turnaround now, then it's lost for good. And so there's been a huge lobbying effort, a substantive lobbying effort, which then plays out into policy, since policy to a certain extent listens to the zeitgeist.
Ja, ich habe vielleicht noch einen Punkt, auf den wir eingehen könnten. Und zwar, ich war ja verantwortlich für die deutschen Kernkraftwerke über 11 Jahre als Leiter der deutschen Atomverwaltung im Bundesumweltministerium. Und ich kenne die ganzen Genehmigungsverfahren auch aus dem Land. Ja. Ich war in Hessen, war ich auch für die Genehmigung und für die Aufsicht zuständig. Und ich weiß, wie lange diese Genehmigungsverfahren dauern und wie schwierig das ist, solche Prozesse zu einem sicheren Abschluss zu bringen. Wenn man sich jetzt überlegt, dass Frankreich 10, 20 oder mehr Kernkraftwerke bauen möchte in den nächsten 20 Jahren, ich kann es mir einfach nicht vorstellen. Also wenn man sieht, wie lange der Prozess in Olkiluoto gedauert hat, ja, das waren knapp 20 Jahre. Flamanville sollte bereits 2012 ans Netz gehen. Ja, es wird jetzt möglicherweise 2024 werden. Das sind Zeiten, die limitierend sind, die aber realistisch sind. Und ich glaube auch nicht, dass wenn man dann 10 Kraftwerke baut, die industriellen Kapazitäten ausreichen werden. Es ist heute schon so, dass wir Engpässe haben im Know-how. Ja? Das ist nicht vorhanden, weder bei den spezialisierten Handwerkern, noch bei den Wissenschaftlern, die es begleiten, noch bei der Administration, die es kontrollieren soll und die Genehmigung dafür aussprechen soll. weder bei den Gutachtern noch bei der Industrie. Die Fertigungskapazitäten von Reaktordruckbehältern, von Sicherheitskomponenten, das erfordert ein enormes Know-how, sonst macht man dort Fehler. Und sobald man Fehler macht, bezahlt man sie mit Zeitverzug. Das sieht man in Olkiluoto, ja, wo dieser Zeitverzug ja, jetzt 20 Jahre Bauzeit resultiert hat. Das sieht man auch in Flamanville. Also es ist meiner Ansicht nach, wenn ich jetzt das rein persönlich bewerten würde, aus meiner Erfahrung, bei solch einem Projekt, ist es einfach absurd. Also man wird es nicht schaffen, auch nicht in Frankreich, eine Zahl von ja, 15, 20 Reaktoren innerhalb von 15, 20 Jahren zu errichten. Das wird nicht möglich sein. Das wird nicht möglich sein und erst recht nicht im weltweiten Maßstab, um das Klimaproblem zu begrenzen. Und wenn man sich heute überlegt, dass die Kernenergie ja unter 3% ja, Primärenergie ersetzt, dann weiß man, das ist dann natürlich sehr wenig. Und wenn man davon weg wollte, dann müsste man weltweit 5.000, 6.000 Reaktoren bauen und das bis 2050. Das sind Szenarien, die sind einfach absurd. Das schafft keiner, das geht gar nicht. Selbst wenn man es wollte, also wenn man ein Fan von Nuklearenergie wäre, es geht nicht. Ja, es geht nicht. Und ich denke, dass diese Vorstellungen eigentlich nur dazu dienen, ja, diese Technik am Leben zu halten, dass vielleicht ein paar gebaut werden und ja, steckt dahinter, aber ein realistisches Ziel ist wirklich zu schaffen. Das gibt es einfach nicht, selbst wenn man der größte Fan der Kernenergie ist.
Haben Sie noch weitere Fragen? Wir kommen schon langsam ans Ende von unserer Stunde. Dann bedanke ich mich sehr, dass Sie zu unserer Presseunterhaltung gekommen sind. Und ja, also vielen Dank auch an alle Sprecher. Und ich würde dann das Zoom-Meeting schließen. Wenn Sie noch weitere Fragen haben, dann gerne auch per E-Mail an mich. Wir haben einen Verteiler von Kontakten auf unsere Aussendung geschrieben. Also gerne auch per E-Mail weitere Fragen. Vielen Dank. Und
eine Frage
ja.
nur, es gibt ein Embargo oder eine Sperrfrist für die Pressemeldung, Ihre Pressesendung?
Ja, die wollten wir nach diesem Pressegespräch die Sperrfrist machen, aber das wäre, wenn ich mich richtig erinnere, haben wir da geschrieben, heute Nachmittag war das, glaube ich.
Nachmittag, ja.
Heute 15 Uhr hatten wir gesagt.
Genau, heute 15 Uhr hatten wir gesagt. Ja.
Okay.
No, thanks a lot for the briefing. It was very interesting.
Okay.
Dankeschön.
Dankeschön.
Danke.
Okay.
Wiedersehen.
Ja, tschüss zusammen.
Thank you.
Goodbye.